to this space of Animaná and Hecho por Nosotros. This is a side event at the ECOSOC Partnership Forum. This is a side event co-hosted by Stanford Angel and Entrepreneurs. Here we have Radhika Shah, who supports and helps the work of Hecho por Nosotros. So very welcome to Radhika. Well, this is a great opportunity to give one more step around collaboration. Here we are talking about collaboration, and I think we have to connect with humility, maybe. Is that a human value that will let us go to collaboration, co-creation. Here we are honored to have great speakers around the world looking for this transition in this system change. Animaná, Hecho por Nosotros, was born in Patagonia around that beautiful nature that inspires people around the world. But also when you live locally, you can find all the challenges and the disadvantage in order that local people, indigenous people, micro, small, medium firms can embrace technology and different tools of our system. At Animaná, Hecho por Nosotros, with this in our heart, we embrace this co-creation, this transversal dialogue that brings us all together co-creating solutions.
Welcome to today's dialogue on reimagining collaboration and co-creation, embracing regenerative models and digital innovation to advance systemic change for sustainability and equity. I would like to welcome each of you on behalf of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs to this ECOSOC Partnership Forum UN side event. Happy to collaborate with Hecho por Nosotros on this event. I am Radhika Shah, co-president of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs, a community of 3,000 plus alumni, students, and faculty come together to advance tech innovation and entrepreneurship. Engaging with local communities enables us to ensure solutions are contextually relevant and empower some of the world's most climate vulnerable regions with the tools and knowledge to adapt and thrive in the face of accelerating environmental threats. It is imperative in this moment that local grassroots communities, rural and indigenous peoples are front and center, not just as beneficiaries, but leaders, co-designers of the systems change happening and needed in our world. Hecho por Nosotros and Adriana's inspiring leadership is one such example of reimagining collaboration in this age of digital metamorphosis, bringing systemic change anchored in agency and co-creation, circular regenerative innovation, and equitable digital access.
So my name is Trish Lang and I manage the Education and Africa Initiatives at Hecho por Nosotros. Here we're dedicated goals in the creative industries and beyond. And at the core of it is creating collaborative frameworks. They lie at the heart of all our projects and initiatives. Our organization was founded by the amazing Adriana as a response to, unsustainable mass consumption models dominating many of the global markets and industries. And here we recognize the urgent need for new approaches in education, ones that prioritize social, environmental consciousness over short-term gains. And we have a strong focus on youth, women, and other underserved communities. We believe that to truly achieve systemic change, we must work together, bridging diverse perspectives and integrating knowledge across cultures and industries. So the power of collaboration always moves us forward. We embrace collaborative frameworks to drive impactful change. Our work is built on partnerships that amplify voices, uplift marginalized communities, and foster deep connections with nature. So some of the frameworks, key frameworks that have shaped our initiatives are multi-stakeholder engagement. We bring together artisans, SMEs, and policymakers and global brands to create solutions. We have community-led innovation, learning from grassroots experiences and indigenous knowledge to design regenerative models. Education and capacity building programs, which equip small businesses and artisans with tools needed to thrive in the global economy. Cross-sector collaboration, working with academia, industry leaders, international organizations to align efforts with the sustainability goals.
To be here, it's an honor to be with my collaborator and friend of 30 years, Adriana. So let's start. One of the things we've seen come out of the internet world, in this collaborative world, is an assault on truth. About 10 years ago, our late night comedian, Stephen Colbert, coined the term truthiness, that truth doesn't matter anymore. Now we're talking about truthiness, which is sort of a concept in the neighborhood of truth. Something may have an element of truthiness. Of course, Camilla, you're a journalist, and to journalists, there's no such thing as truthiness. There's only the truth. Kellyanne Conway, who was running policy for Trump in his first administration, said, certainly you may have facts, but I have alternative facts. Of course, there's no such thing as alternative facts. And our great sociologist, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but not their own set of facts. And that's what we're operating. That's what the internet has done today. It's really eradicated truth. Now, for that to happen, it means traditional media has to collapse, and largely, not entirely, largely it has. The economic model for much professional journalism has been eroded. Group M, the biggest media buyer in the world, estimates that from 2000, the beginning of the internet for consumers, to 2016, 60% of advertising has been sucked out of television, radio, newspapers, and magazines and gone to two places, Facebook and Google. Social media is changing the entire landscape. And let me show, here's where I'd like to show one slide. Yeah, this is a pretty remarkable slide. Adriana will recognize this. 2000, about 10% believe nothing online. That's now climbed to about 22%. This is a remarkable showing that, keep in mind, this is happening as alternative media sources are disappearing or becoming weaker, and people are going online, and you can see their faith of information online has really eroded. And to collaborate, we have to have truth. We have to have facts. We have to be able to compare things.
Andrew, thank you for being here with us today. And my question for you would be, how can financial markets and climate finance be optimized to scale regenerative models and digital innovations, ensuring that systemic change efforts in sustainability and equity receive the necessary investment and long-term viability? Thank you.
Precisely the kind of interdisciplinary and intersectoral collaboration that Adriana mentioned at the outset, describing Hechos por Nosotros. But I'd like to put a particular emphasis on the role of the private sector and financial markets. Not because that's better per se, but because, first of all, that's what I'm spending most of my time on these days. And second of all, because I think a lot of the potential of the private sector has not been fully appreciated and fully realized, particularly in the context of sustainable development and managing the impacts of climate change, which are the things that I work on the most. I'm very pleased to say that, like Radhika, I am quite focused on working both with investors and entrepreneurs, particularly investors in early stage technology companies that have developed business models and new technologies to address climate-related challenges and are seeking investment, clients, and other form of support to bring those technologies to market. And I think very holistically about the kinds of technologies that can be transformative for communities. I think there are those that are very obviously sustainable in their very nature, right? By building into their model circular economy, protection of ecosystems, responsible use of natural resources, those kinds of things. But I also think there are other enabling technologies or protecting technologies that might not be as obviously sustainable on their face, but are critical building blocks of society's efforts to provide for human needs and economic needs in an environmentally sustainable manner. And one, I think, good example of that is the adoption of the cell phone or the mobile phone, right? And while I think few people would look at a phone and say that it's a sustainable technology, and I'm certainly not going to argue that there aren't problems with management of raw materials and other things around phones. I think the fact that the people in all walks of life, in all communities around the world, almost all communities around the world, people prioritize their limited economic resources to purchase phones. And they do that because phones are a critical enabling technology for whatever it is they are trying to achieve personally, professionally, economically, and socially. And so I think there are many technologies like that. And I also believe that many climate solutions are often more financially viable than is sometimes assumed. I work a lot these days in an area that is frequently described as climate change adaptation and resilience. And so there are, generally speaking, two main ways to address climate challenges. There's what's sometimes called mitigation, which is reducing the emissions that cause the climate problem in the first place. And then there's adaptation, which is helping society to minimize and cope with the impacts of a changing climate. And those are both critical, but there has not been enough investment and efforts across society in adaptation and resilience because I would argue there's been an underappreciation of how large and how urgent the need is to address those. Many people believe that these climate challenges are far in the future, although I think that's it's increasingly obvious day by day as we see the disruptions in our natural world and extreme weather that we've never had before, that many of these climate impacts are already here.
Pranav, nice to see you. Thank you as well for being here. My question for you is, how can blockchain and Web3 technologies be leveraged to enhance transparency, traceability, and community-driven collaboration in sustainability efforts, ensuring that regenerative models are both scalable and equitable? Thank you.
The current economic fiat system has really not been able to service a huge number of people across the globe, right? I mean, think about it. There's still billions of people who are unbanked, right? And we know for a fact that crypto blockchain is offering solutions which are cheaper, which are faster, which do serve these unbanked. I have some examples to share with you, right? So for example, if I were to say that, okay, where is crypto really driving impact, right? Financial inclusion is one of the easiest examples that comes to mind, right? Where you have stable coins for remittances. For people who are in this business, know how costly it is to really move money across from, for example, the US to India. But at the same time, using crypto, you can really do that for a fraction of the cost, which can actually make a huge difference to people who are really having to do those transactions, right? Let's talk about climate resilience. And I refer again to gatekeepers who really decide which projects will be funded or which won't be funded, because those projects are really ascribing to certain standards that these gatekeepers have set. And today we have digital measurement, reporting, and verification systems in place, which are again based on chain, which are based on blockchain, which can really replace these gatekeepers, certify, verify the impact is happening where it's supposed to happen, can be relied upon really to generate and also, for example, extinguish such credits really to drive finance to projects which are creating impact at the front lines.
Thank you so much, Pranav. It's an honor to listen all the opportunities. And here I would like to comment that and also take along with Andrew. We have this mobile phone that really it's the big door as all the technology advance, but always should be a medium, yes, should be a door in order to navigate. And what we see every day at local communities, regional economies, is that the divide is so big that when startups are born and a lot of noise, but finally when they want to go to the community, the dialogue is so far, so difficult, yes? So we really need to introduce ways of co-creation where technology is the door and people are so open, so hungry in order to get all the information, all the solutions, and to bring new solutions to the system. So thank you. I think that the most important is, and here I would like also to take Andrew, not to wait for governments, policymakers, just we together collaborating. But the system of collaboration should learn another way of collaboration and not the way of collaboration of the system, because this is one of the bottlenecks that we have. We have to dive into a different system of co-creation and collaboration.
Luis, I would like to ask you, in a world that often prioritizes globalized solutions, how can bioregional approaches serve as interconnected nodes for a systemic regeneration? What strategies can help balance locally rooted, context-specific practices with global learning and collaboration to drive meaningful and scalable impact? Thank you, Luis.
So ultimately, when we think of globalized solutions, we might very easily come to a conclusion that we need to find solutions, scale up solutions, and use the same approaches that we've used for globalization. And I think that is a really big pitfall that we have in front of us, and we have to be really careful in not falling into that pitfall. Because as we scale up challenges and scale up solutions, we start just copying and pasting. We start homogenizing, solutions in a world that thrives on diversity. So we really need to focus and ask ourselves if we understand diversity and how diversity really is expressed in nature as an enabler of potentials. As diversity is what allows us to be resilient, to innovate, to evolve. And this has been proven in 3.8 billion years of life, learning to live and create conditions for life itself. So this is critical. So I would, come back to ask the question, can we ask the forest, how do we actually, solve our global problems, and how do we come back to bioregional and local thinking? And in this process, what comes to mind is really fungi and the mycelial network. So if, and whoever's in the computer, just look for mycelial networks in Google and look for an image. And you'll see these images are basically not very different to textiles. And what is really interesting about mycelial networks, when you look at a forest, obviously you don't see these networks acting. You maybe see the fruits of the fungi coming out as fungi, but underneath the ground, the mycelial networks are providing a really important critical role in supporting the forest and all life connected to the forest, in supporting the entanglements of life within that forest. So understanding this, we realize that ultimately, how do mycelial networks operate? They operate, first of all, under the premise of abundance and not the premise of scarcity. Modern economy is based on the premise of scarcity and accumulation, while fungi actually works on the premise of abundance of everything that's around them and the capacity to distribute abundance. So abundance becomes a really key element in the approach of dealing with these global, let's say, issues. Additionally, we need to really think how that distributed abundance creates increased vitality and increases the flows between each of the nodes. So this is where bioregionalism really comes in. If we look at the world is not conformed by north-south and by powers. It's actually conformed by nodes that are landscapes, functional landscapes, which we call bioregions. So a bioregion is basically an area defined, and the easiest way to understand it might be thinking of a watershed, but an area defined by a place where energy and resources in nature are cycled as much as possible. They falls into the watershed. The forest in the watershed shares those nutrients. Those nutrients create microclimate and micro water cycles that help create more rain to fall into that same cycle. And all the life and nutrients in that space are creating more vitality in the space. Nonetheless, that bioregion actually is related to the next bioregion and the next bioregion because they share resources and they interact. Nonetheless, no bioregion tends to dominate or extract from the other bioregion. So bioregionalism becomes really a really important strategy to shift globalized problems to localized contexts and solutions. So we really need to start embodying and living bioregionally. And this is what we call bioregioning. We need to start acting bioregionally, start building local economies, not based on monetary capital, but also on natural capital, social capital, cultural capital, spiritual capital within the bioregions to create vitality. And if all bioregions of the world increase their vitality and their capacity to create conditions for life.
Thank you, Luis. It's an honor, a pleasure to listen to all your wisdom, the transmission of a life of connection with nature and extending this to the world. Maybe here we have to go for another kind of intelligence, no, of intuition, and recall again humility in order to could accept that abundance, to accept that common intelligence that is beyond our stupid system.
Thank you to you too, Edward, for being here. I'd like to ask you, as a pioneering leader in both higher education and regenerative development, how do you envision the role of universities in driving systemic change towards sustainability? And what can educational institutions do to integrate regenerative practices into their curricula and research to prepare future leaders for the challenges ahead? Thank you.
But there are two words that are important in your question, which is one systemic and the other one is sustainability. What do these words really mean? Sustainability is something that I think is not achievable anymore. We have mortgaged the possibility for future generations to have actually a decent life in the future unless we revert the damage. The concept is almost 40 years old and it was never achieved by society. The other question is, are universities preparing the professionals to face the current challenges, not even the future challenges? I mean, if we look at the top universities and the top rankings, are the criteria for these rankings adequate? The number of steady fixed professors, the number of publications in peer-reviewed journals. My question is, do these rankings, do these universities actually, are they responsible for solving our current challenges? Do we not have enough information to actually start acting instead of just diagnosing? So it's a big question, you know, what is the role of the university? Now that artificial intelligence comes into play, what professions are going to exist already in next year that are not going to be substituted by AI? And what are the challenges that youth have to be prepared? So we're looking at huge challenges already. And so how do institutions that are dedicated to education bring in regeneration? Well, it's just one, realizing where the solutions are and where to start. And I've identified 5 main challenges. For me, challenge number 1 that many institutions are facing, many people are facing is it humans and nature, or humans are nature? So that separation of us from nature is key to understand how to deal, and Luis just talked about this. The challenge number 2 is the reductionist approach. Ever since the Greeks, we've been forced into reductionism. Our universities are structured in departments, in schools that don't have a common language. So how can we separate the material from the spiritual? And for academia, you talk about spiritual, they'll put you in relation to their religious department because they don't understand spirituality. You know, you have to be reasonable, you have to be mathematical, you have to think as Isaac Newton thought. And what this has as consequences, the solutions are detached. Like decarbonization strategy in Costa Rica is based on electric mobility. And yeah, I love an electric car. That's my car there. But that's not going to solve our current challenges. And getting rid of cattle is not going to solve our current challenges. So we really have to look at the real issues. And one of the things we have limitations is to think on exponential change. So we're actually looking at changes that are hugely exponential, and we're taught to think in a linear fashion. And exponential change is biodiversity loss. Exponential change is the development of technology and artificial intelligence. Another challenge is, why do we believe in the wrong things? Why are we still using the wrong things? You know, who had the bright idea to put poison on the food we're going to eat? Who had the bright idea of measuring with GDP? In Spanish, I call it Producto Interno para Brutos, because it never had a relationship with development. And the challenge most difficult to solve is the unlearning. So we really need to start looking at what we need to unlearn. So where is our guiding compass for bringing sustainability towards regeneration in the academia? There is a very simple one, the safe operating space for humanity. Here we have soil is missing, here spirituality is missing, here politics is missing, but it still gives us guidance. And we know since the first publication in 2009, biodiversity loss, fertilizer use, and now more recently pesticides, chemicals, and plastics are what are taking us from our safe operating space for humanity. So if we look at this, and we look at the disappearance of nature globally and in Latin America, we've lost 95% of the abundance of biodiversity. That means ecosystems are collapsing already. So we do not have another 30 years to react. And the world is concentrated on CO2 emissions. Everybody's talking about reducing CO2 emissions. Carbon is the best input we have to revert planetary collapse. It's what feeds plants, it's what feeds the soil. It can be stored back into the soil if we do regeneration. So we really need to look at where the most important things are. And none of what we're looking around the planet has been caused by future emissions. So we need to reinvent ourselves. And I used to think we needed a revolution. Now I think we need an evolution. So we need to go from the typical ego society, transition through the eco-society, and go to seva. So humanity in service of life. This is what regeneration is about. And the way to do it is using nature's wisdom, learning from nature. So we need to link everybody back to nature. And Luis talked very nicely about that. And this is my model of regenerative development. So at a bioregional level, we need to apply these 6 dimensions. And the connection between Mother Earth and spirituality is fundamental in both directions. So regeneration starts with ourselves. Regeneration starts with our consciousness, our understanding, our responsibility. And we need to reinvent the way we've destroyed politics, culture, society, economy. So for me, regenerative development is at any development service of life. So the question, how do universities bring regeneration to their programs? Their programs have to be in service of life. And we should measure that in service of life. Why not with happiness and hope instead of GDP?
Thank you, Edward. I think Adriana wants to comment on your amazing presentation.
Thank you, Edward. Such interesting and important concept, insights, no, and reality you bring to the table. For many years, I have been so worried since I'm small about education, how makes us stupid much more than smart. And so important to unit efforts in order to navigate and go beyond this system.
Being a moderator and the speaker myself, I'm going to do a very small speech regarding the importance of collaboration and co-creation within the NGO Hecho por Nosotros. Being a journalist, I'm a researcher, I'm a storyteller, and I believe the greatest creation do not happen in isolation. Collaboration is always the key to make research, a story flow better. And an example of this is the most recent publication we created that is gonna be published soon by a European publishing house. And this academic chapter is regarding fair trade. We tried to write a chapter talking about the fault of certifications. So how sometimes there's this top-down approach on commerce that take out the human aspect of it, the dignity, the equity, and sometimes even the sustainability, because we talked about indigenous communities and how they are not included in the local and value chain, in the global value chain, but they're left out for economic purposes. So the purpose of our chapter that we wrote together with other researchers, with involving artisans, of course, and involving as well NGOs tools such as the toolkit, was to point out how most of the times bottom-up approaches and collaboration can bring actual solutions. The toolkit is an example of this. As Trish Langman was saying at the beginning of this, the toolkit is an ongoing process, is a technological tool that the NGO developed. And on the toolkit, indigenous artisans can find ways to be included in the local and global value chain through blockchain technology, as well as they can attend the University of Hecho por Nosotros classes, be involved in the culture, in the studies, in the local and global value chain. And this has been an amazing process that's been created by the NGO and by all the collaborators that have been collaborating in all these 15, almost 16 years since its existence. Thank you to everyone for being here at the ECOSOC Partnership Forum. We reaffirmed the power and our commitment to collaboration and co-creation as fundamental drivers of economic transformation. Let us recognize that by working together, by building bridges instead of barriers, we can create solutions that are sustainable, inclusive, and just.